I don't find anything about schools teaching engineering exciting. Like
Totally.
when you say, we should fix the curriculum, I'm like, I don't want to. I don't want. That's not exciting to me at all. And maybe it's because I actually taught some sound engineering modules back in the day in a whatever type of college course, but it's not an exciting space to me. And I'm just the question I wrote down is school the best way?
There's not many things that I look forward to more throughout the week than this night. It's one of those things that, like, I don't know, we used to spend a lot more time together having these conversations, and due to the separation, because of coronavirus, we've had to kind of schedule these kind of nights where we're having conversations about our industry and our place in them and people alike. And Spider and Rory, you've been kind of infiltrating more rooms through Unfuck projects and getting to know more and more people and kind of their points of view on the audio engineer industry and the music industry as a whole. And hopefully we'll be getting a few of them on the podcast as guests, and that excites me to involve more people in the conversation. I kind of wanted to start tonight off with a cry out to the community. I've been sitting on this idea of why we do things, and kind of professing and begging, in a sense, the understanding of maybe explaining and being a little more generous with our knowledge and our techniques of what people really do have to offer, and explaining why we do things. And when it comes to this conversation, we're talking kind of technical sometimes here and there. I know we're avoidant of that subject matter, but between specifically Rory and I, we can talk for hours and get really geeky, and we will do that sometimes. I think last week we touched a little bit on some things, but really I want to open the black box and kind of talk about what goes on in the studio, like what real life things go on in the studio, and how we approach, the day before it, up to it, the day of, and sometimes some technique, and really kind of divulge secrets and have no secrets. And just every time I look somewhere and I see someone posting on Instagram, there's a blackout on the thing that matters. It's like, I use this, and then it's like the line is out on the plugin above, and it's just like this mystery of something. And we use the plugin as a metaphor. I mean, there's just always such a mystery around what goes on. I mean, the role of the mix engineer, the audio engineer, is such a mystery. I was talking to Nathaniel about this today in a meeting, like Nathaniel being my manager, Nathaniel, and how Tyler Johnson has the number one song in the country right now. We're trying to kind of push for him to, it's sick. Trying to push for him like producer of the year, Grammy nom this year. It's like, wouldn't it be great if there was like a engineer of the year Grammy? Like if we could, through conversations, bring enough kind of clout or interest in the engineer role that it was warranted attention to. Yeah. And that was the idea behind the conversations night, which was getting a bunch of engineers together to discuss our roles, our place, where we want to see it go, how to evolve it, and that got put on hold. So I want to come at this conversation as we start to bring guests on as well. But that's kind of the goal here, is to bring awareness and attention to what an engineer does in the room, and there's such a mystery behind it. And I feel that way too when I would produce and I would send out stuff to get mixed. I'd be like, I know what you do, but you're not sharing what you did to my mix. Like, I'm so curious, but your approach is. I want to talk about approaches on things, but, and there's the fine line about life approach and technical approach to things. And I know we're going to lean towards, overall life approach than to the technical. This kind of takes me to thinking about something Tony Maserati said at one of his visits to the Conversations evening. He says this stuff won't be in a book. And, when I think about what he's passed on to me, I don't sit there mixing thinking, oh, that's a Tony Maserati mix technique. Like, I don't think I do anything that I learned from Tony technique-wise necessarily, but it was what he brought to the process, to the professionalism of the process, to the understanding of the client and the relationship, and all those things that need to be passed down for people to understand what it's like to elevate themselves. And we're still trying to understand the career trajectory ladder of an engineer, and we're trying to work that out as a group and kind of talk about that and bring that to the foreground of this conversation too. But I just, there's nothing. It's a quote from Alan Watts: "The only certainty is uncertainty," and we kind of always have to be looking at what could be. And there's limitless potential in the role, and I don't think people understand what our role is even, and I'd love to bring awareness to it. So that was just something I was thinking about this morning, before meeting up with you guys.
Yeah, there's so much there.
So much.
It's interesting. One question that comes to mind is it ever okay to have secrets in terms of techniques? There's a couple of things that I've been working on over the last year or two that make a meaningful difference to my output. I feel like there's other puzzle pieces to fall into place, but I share everything, and I'm not sharing those. They're small but real competitive advantages that and I'm very helpful to lots of friends who are mastering engineers.
Sure.
But there's a couple of things I hold back, and
you want to talk about them now?
No, I don't. I don't. There's more. Like I say, there's more work, and you would lose your mind at how boring they are. The other thing is, I think you're 100% on point. I knew it coming out here. I remember talking to one of my best friends in Ireland before I came out, and knowing that I wasn't very good at what I did, technically, because I just hadn't the experience in the real rooms, but also knowing that wouldn't be the limiting factor. The limiting factor would be getting my head on straight. All of the stuff you just mentioned, how to move, how to deal with clients, how to position yourself.
Knowing which battles to fight.
Yeah, right. And knowing what really matters. And if it's fussing over such and such a piece of gear or whatever, instead of the song or the relationship or whatever, or lunch, just getting lunch at the right time.
Not to take the pause,
not to push through.
Yeah, right.
But actually just stop. That discipline thing.
It's an emotional sensitivity to the room and everyone involved, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess I bring up the secrets part because, and we none of us are good at taking our own advice, but on Tuesday I was going live with Matt Rad, and I just started using a new tool, and I rarely jump in on new plugins. I'm kind of like, I talk about all the time, I kind of use the same 5 to 10 tools, and I use them, and they're efficient. They get me to my end goal pretty quickly, and it takes a lot for another tool to jump into that. But something was recommended to me by one of my apprentices, Ingmar, and he was extremely excited about it. He knows my workflow. He's like, you should give this a shot. So I spent the whole morning on a mix working with this plugin, and I go on live and I'm like, wait, do I share that I'm using this new tool because it's so efficient for me right now, and I'm killing it with it. Like the mix is, as of now, the day after, there was a no note thing. There was no notes, and like everyone's really happy with it. So I killed it with this new tool. I used it on every track. I overused it. I abused it and understood it on everything. So then I can refine where I use it, right? But I was so hesitant to talking about it. And I said that live with Matt. And he's like, well, you got to tell us. I was like, yeah, I'll tell you. Like, I guess it's not that big of a deal, but I wasn't taking my own advice. I was going into that live with a secret. And I was like, why am I thinking that way when I have this note written down that I want to talk about this on the podcast, why we have secrets, yet I want to keep one. So I don't, I think it's only natural to think that, well, this gives us a leg up, this tool, but it's how we use the tool, right?
It's totally how you use it.
And that's what I realized very quickly. I mean, granted, also, with a meditation practice, and there's only so much you can sit with before you actually realize the truth of the matter, which is, wait, what does this even matter? It's a fucking tool that everyone has access to. It's public domain.
It's public, I mean, it can be purchased by...
These things blow up anyway. You know what I mean? They blow up just, you find the nichest, weirdest plugin company, and, a month later on Gearstuds, everyone has it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, they're going to blow up. If it's any good, it'll blow up.
Great tool.
And even if it's not, it'll probably blow up.
Yeah.
Shout out to Waves there.
Yeah. This was a Waves Factory Spectre multi-band saturator. It's fucking brilliant. So easy to use in all the modes.
Wait a second. I just dissed Waves and then you're saying...
It's Waves Factory. That's why I follow it up. Waves Factory.
Okay.
It's very different. I don't use Waves. You know that.
It's
not
that's
installed. I don't even have the bundle on my computer.
I thought Factory was some sort of like, their new Workman brand or something.
No.
Blue collar Waves plugins. Workman Factory plugins.
What color were the old ones?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Purple.
I mean, it makes me think about competition, and I wonder what the truth of the competition landscape really is. Like, are mix engineers in competition with one another, or are they not? It's like, and if sounding better than having mixes that sound better than come from other mix engineers, does that give you a competitive advantage? And if it does, then how do we feel about competition? It's really about the ethics around competition and where that line is. Like as someone who is attempting to, fulfill their potential, you have an obligation to leverage every ethical competitive advantage. So for you and your family and your, the people close to you, whatever. And I wonder where the line is. Zero secrets? Maybe. I don't know.
Has me thinking about pharma companies, how like they create a medication and it's like you're not allowed to take that formula, but they're allowed to keep it a secret until I think it's like 10 years or something.
Yeah.
And then it's
But even then, they don't have to reveal their
Right.
production process,
Mm-hmm.
which is so important to the efficacy of the drug, right? So
yeah.
the generics have the molecule, but they don't know the process. They have to sort of try to reverse engineer it.
And I think that there might be something that we can take from that analogously is like there's a lot that we can and should share or could share. Like I can tell the people the tools that I use and even the way I think about something, but it's all how this is compiled and in my brain and then also in the team or the people I work with's brain, and how it's being communicated on the day to day. And that stuff, you can't teach that. You have to be a part of that and witness that and practice that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like you could really share all the things you do and still there would be a difference between people. And it also has me thinking about a point we spoke about at coffee. Was it yesterday morning? It feels like ages ago. When Milton Glaser, a very famous graphic designer, passed away, he's the guy that did I Heart NY, that very famous graphic.
Iconic.
Yeah, so he passed away about a month ago, and I've been kind of in the thick of it, designing and thinking about design more than probably I ever have in my whole life. I mean, running the business now, and it hit me that I just had this moment of realization, like mourning him and then saying, oh, wow, I'm actually doing the same thing he did. And like, I never thought of him as a competitor. I know he never thought of me at all. And it didn't affect either of our outputs. You know what I mean? In fact, the better he got and the more he did and the more I Heart NYs he made, the higher graphic design, the higher the pedestal that graphic design was placed on. The better work that Pentagram does every day that I see it, rather than saying, oh man, I wish I did that. Yeah. Instead, I'm saying, oh, this is amazing. Because now there's another great piece of graphic design on the internet and in the world that when a client who I might have tomorrow walks into that building designed by Milton Glaser or Pentagram, they're now thinking, man, I need something like that. I can't afford them, but I need something like that. Yeah. And someone will be there for it. It might not even be me, but someone will be there. And now their expectation will be raised. And so we're really, I mean, it just hit me all in that moment, really thinking like 100% just mourning Milton Glaser and thanking him in a way for what he contributed, that I was like, we're all just in a pool of engineers or designers or producers or songwriters or any pool that you're a part of that you're contributing to. And, some people might make more waves in that pool than others, but regardless, you're still a part of that thing. You're still a graphic designer among graphic designers. And if you look at it hierarchically, yeah, you're probably going to need to dissect everything John did if you think he's higher up than you or something. But instead, if you're saying, how can I contribute? And John's work and Serban's work and all of these people are making mix engineering more respected,
more valuable.
Yeah, more valuable. It's only going to help, actually. And so,
but there are a limited number of mixes that pay above a certain amount every year.
Sure.
And there are, more there are more mix engineers that want those mixes than there are mixes, right? So that creates a competitive atmosphere.
Wait, hold on. Let's pull back there. You think there are more there are more mixers than songs at that rate? How could there be more mixers than songs?
There are more mix engineers that want those gigs than get them.
Oh yeah, but that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you mean that are qualified to, not qualified.
No, just who want them.
Right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be every mixer?
Well,
Not necessarily.
Not every is actively engaged in trying to get those gigs.
Right.
And not every mixer is striving for popular music releases,
Right.
which tend to have the higher budgets, right? So that's something that you have to decide somewhere along the line in your career ladder, is understanding where you fit in, what's your niche, are you even capable of making overly dense pop competitive records? That's a thing that you have to study and practice and want to do. I mean, you don't just kind of stumble upon how to mix a pop record.
Right.
That also can stand the test of time, which is my goal always. Trying not to only mix for today, but I know some people are, and that's kind of what I was getting from your competition perspective. I think that we want to elevate the entire community. That was the whole idea of the conversation platform, and instill healthy competitiveness, right? Like I'm an overly competitive human, and I made the joke about this with my manager because we played tennis, and I said it today at our meeting over coffee about where I kind of wanted to move next year, kind of genre-wise, and kind of make a little pivot. And
In tennis? Or?
No, in mixing, we're having a conversation, and I talked about how competitive I am. He's like, oh, I know how competitive you are. Now that I play tennis, like I get really frustrated. I put my head down, and that's how I was feeling about when Serban would put out a mix and when Tony would put out a mix when I was younger, and even up till recently. You're just like you're fueled by how great these things, the possibility of the sonic landscape that these people have the capability of achieving, and you want to do that. I did say one night that I think sparked a little controversy, which was I don't really feel that way right now. I don't press play on New Music Friday and I'm blown away by a mix. And when I am, it's someone that's a peer of mine. Like when Elton puts out a mix, I'm like, damn, that homie's kindred spirit, man. Like we're aligned on this low end thing and this warmth, and like I get inspired by the younger people sometimes, and then sometimes I'm like, man, that felt like they spent an hour on it because of whatever reason. It was late at night, and dude wanted to put it out tomorrow, or whatever it is. Like there's always an explanation for why, but I think the competitive nature is healthy. We should have it. We should be looking up to people. We should be striving to achieve what they are achieving, but also along the line realize that there's only so much to go around, but there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of songs being mixed. I mean, there's a lot of mixers that are working, and I think it's I think I'm realizing this year specifically that it is a very you can make a good living off of mixing records. That I think I was told otherwise when I was studying, that this was maybe a dying business, and I don't feel like that's the case right now. So I think people should strive to want to be in this position, and not think they have to go into making beats when they're not as good at making beats as they are at making people's beats sound good, right? I think they should make that distinction as early as possible where they actually want to head, and that's something that means a lot to me, because I think I got pushed in a far direction the other way, and then I had to come all the way back around to understanding that engineering was my focus. And I think people should realize that as early as possible, and then double down on it and go for it.
I have a question about this. Is you meet with a lot of engineers, all of you. Do you feel like the mindset or the questions that are being asked by young engineers are, how can I make a career, or how can I be like engineer X, Y, or Z? Is it both? Is it leaning more in one direction? And is there a different question that they should be asking?
I have a hard time thinking that engineers that I meet with even believe that they can have a career. That seems to be the first thought, or first bit of conversation. It seems to be met with, man, I'm just trying to get through the month. Man, I'm just trying to get through today.
A lot of them
head down.
feel like they're in an abusive relationship with someone that they love or something that they love, in this case, music. But it's a very sort of dysfunctional relationship and often quite unequal in terms of what they put in versus what they get out. And I definitely have lived that at periods in my life, but it feels dysfunctional. I think the thing that Spider and I are sort of becoming more and more obsessed about, we do what we do when we tune rooms or, whatever we do in the studio, but we're way more interested in unlocking people's potential than we are in how we treat their room or what we do to their speakers or whatever, the details. Just like you're more focused on what the design says than the font, you know what I mean? You love fonts and you're obsessed about them, but that's not, when you're designing, it's not what you're about.
Right.
That fades into the background.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of the questions we get are they have the tenor of the conversation that's out there, and often it's
overly confident. There's sort of, people are almost seem to think that it's expected of them to have certain things figured out.
Right.
And they talk in a way where they project that they've figured things out. But we all know it's not figured out, and it's maybe not even the right paradigm to be thinking in, And so there's that that general lack of guidance.
Yeah.
For the young generation, they're just, the voices aren't there with them in the work environment. They're on YouTube and they're distant. They're not personalized exchanges of ideas.
I can't find because I've been recently kind of spending some time looking, because I keep getting asked for resources on how to be a professional mix engineer, and I can't really find a resource on what it's like to model a career path. Unless you're lucky, like someone like me, and has come up under someone like Tony. That's kind of the way, and that's a craftsman kind of upbringing, right? That's that apprentice protege, and that's cool. But it's highly unlikely that you'll be indoctrinated in that way, right? There's
only a few of those rooms that you can get into,
and there's got to be another way, right? There has to be other resources, and just kind of going back to your question, like. Yeah, it seems like all the things that the three of us have responded to, that there's nothing positive yet. And I'd like to flip it around. And it's almost like we were talking yesterday along the lines of the design, what we talked about at coffee. We talked about a curriculum, like being able to, after you
art club,
with your art club, with conversations, this idea of we should figure out a way to at some point go back to audio schools, design schools, and with data, with feedback from our conversation, maybe approach a curriculum of, to study that can get you more, I guess, I don't really know
prepared.
Prepared, because I'm trying to say like
primed.
Certified, but I hate that word.
No, I feel you.
Prepared for the real life and primed.
But I think it's actually bringing the curriculum, or bringing school to the studio, so that you have formal engagement with learning, but it's in a working environment. It's where actual records are being made. Because if you're not there, you can't learn that stuff.
What I was going to get to is, you normally see in audio schools or design schools people that aren't actually full-time designing or mixing or producing. It's people that either maybe didn't make it, couldn't hack it, and then they've gone to teaching. It's like those who can't teach. I mean, that can't be true, right? Like professors in academia are New York Times best-selling authors, and they're trying to.
Sure, there's a great variety.
There's a great variety.
Engineering teachers,
but are there? I mean, the audio engineers that I know that are making records on a daily basis wouldn't have time to educate.
You can't do both
outside of their rooms, is what you're talking about, which is you have the apprentices, but there has to be a way to affect a larger demographic than the 4 per room per master.
We often talk about languages and being able to
say that.
You make more masters. You make more people good at it.
Yeah,
you know.
But we speak about different languages. So being able to speak design, or artistry, engagement. You speak design. Spider speaks design. Spider speaks music. I speak music and technical. That we each have these overlapping sort of circles, and I think that it's rare to find people who are really great at engineering who are really great at teaching.
Yeah.
That's a very rare intersection. And then who are in a position, if they're really great at engineering, maybe they're just making records, or if they're really good at teaching, then they've been teaching too long and they're not making records, and they're still talking about stuff that isn't relevant.
Yeah.
So it's a tough. I think Spider's right.
But if the people that are let's just keep audio school as a thing, because it's not going anywhere, right? I agree with you that the school should be brought to the studio. But audio school exists, and it's going to exist, and people are going to spend a lot of money going there. So what if engineers that are working, making records that are impacting millions of people in their ears on a daily basis, rewrite the curriculum?
Right. I don't think it's the curriculum. I agree it could be improved, but the thing that you're still missing is a senior person investing in a junior person, and like what that commitment yields.
Yeah, but if you have smaller class sizes, I mean, that's why there are private schools with 8 kids per class that follow up the year, like a Waldorf school, and the same teacher goes with you through the subjects.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are ways to implement this that we know work to have as close, because I mean, in Tony's room, there's 4 people, right? So you say you have 8 per teacher, you have 10. Let's say you have 10. You can't give 10 students the proper attention throughout a semester. I mean, just don't have 40 kids in the class. But I think you could do that with 10. And you have a review on the mix, and you go really deep. I mean, I know I could do it if I was a teacher. So
I'm just thinking of you're saying have the, we'll call them masters, designing the curriculum.
Yeah.
You don't have the investment from those people in the young person long term.
Right.
But that's the
But I think
the
what
thing
you were
that
saying
can't be
earlier,
replaced.
Yeah, but I wonder, but that's almost a black box in itself, saying that that's the only model
Exactly.
to be successful in engineering, and it can't be.
Yeah,
There has to be another
Is
model.
school
Is it the best model, or maybe the best for certain reasons? Absolutely. But I don't think it's the only model. And I wonder, with the existing model that isn't that, how can that be reshaped to be better? I think that's sort of where you're getting at. Is
because if a teacher's a good teacher, the teacher will absorb the approach to the education and then be able to disperse of the knowledge in the way that they see fit as being a professional teacher, right? So if you have, because I mean, this happens, guest lectures happen, and then maybe that inspires the teacher to go off that for a few weeks on a thing. I'm thinking specifically, why are we teaching how to use a console versus explaining signal flow as its own thing and gain staging as its own thing outside of a console, right? Like understanding impedance on a microphone is important, kind of, but to say that you can't touch a DAW until you learn the impedance on a microphone seems backwards to me as a way of educating. And
that leads to my question is, so, and I don't mean this to be an...
And you should understand impedance control on microphones and gear. I'm not trying to take that away from importance.
So, not to be in any way dismissive, but I don't find anything about schools teaching engineering exciting. Like when you say, we should fix the curriculum, I'm like, I don't want to. I don't want, that's not exciting to me at all. And maybe it's because I actually taught some sound engineering modules back in the day in a whatever type of college course, but it's not an exciting space to me. And the question I wrote down is school the best way?
Right.
It's not.
Is this a discipline that school can really bring value? There are things where the formality of school, I studied chemistry. Maybe chemistry would be better just done in a lab with no time at the desk. I don't know.
Yeah.
But with recording and mixing and producing, I think you've got to be in the room. It's got to be happening because of what Tony said. It's not in the book.
Yeah.
And the other point that I wrote down is something that I think, as Spider said, and I was thinking about it driving down here, a lot of people are kind of fronting that they've got it figured out because they feel that sort of casting a big shadow is part of what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, I'm working with so-and-so, I've got this gear and I know how to do it. I can make a, banging record, whatever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't leave much room for learning. But I think something that we try and do a lot is get people past the noise of the conversation that's out there and say, if you can get the fundamentals right, you're monitoring some basic gear that you need and then stop thinking about gear. You can start thinking about your artistry and your relationships with clients and stop worrying that, Elton is using whatever on the bus.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I mean, you can kind of have fun with that on Sunday. Like if you want to look on the forums and figure out who's doing what, like as a kind of a pastime, but as something for your work.
Speaking of not exciting, that's not exciting.
Well, different people, like if that's, for some people it's like shopping. It's like, ooh, a new plugin, I get texts every day from people who are like, oh, you got to check this out.
I know.
Like,
I try not to respond to those
won't.
messages. Yeah, I probably won't. I probably won't. Yeah.
But yeah,
I think you're right. I'm having a hard time wanting to give up on the fact that tens of thousands of students are moving to LA after their Berkeley graduation, thinking they've all got it figured out, and not have ever made a record that sounds competitive. But they feel like because they got an education at this institution that they're
ready.
Ready and kind of already fall into the ranks. Versus what you're saying was that's the beginning, and then you get into the room, and if you're lucky, and someone shares the secrets shares the black box.
But by the time you get out of Berkeley, you don't have your teenage brain anymore. It's almost too late. Like you want to get a teenage brain in there because it's like accelerated learning and it's
malleable.
Yeah, and you want like the 15, 16-year-old kids to acclimate to the studio environment, social environment sooner so that it just recedes into the background and they can it just seems like a much faster trajectory if you introduce the human to that social environment sooner, and it's too late after college.
Yeah, so how do you find those people in their teenage years before they go?
Well, this is the cultural
And do we have a program to offer them as an aside to the opportunity of going to Berkeley?
We're recording it right now. That's
that's
point.
What I mean. I think it's a broad... If the level of engineering goes up across the community, then you will have local studios and people all around the country and world that are sort of qualified to pass this stuff down.
That's another reason why we're so obsessed with making things kind of mimetic and succinct, so that you can pass them on, and other people can pass them on in a concise way. The language matters.
I wanted to touch on where the education conversation started from. So I'm running a similar conversations-like thing for designers called Art Club. I guess I should say Status is running it. I'm just one member of that. But anyway, what came up was about our education and where we felt like it was helpful, and then where it didn't help or didn't even provide any information on it. And a lot of that was about, well, what are the economics of design in general? What are the economics of a design agency or a freelancer or working in-house? What does this look like? What are you getting paid? What is all this? It was never spoken about. And no one really thought about it. Even if we were talking about print design, we were talking about different papers and weights and all the different numbers and whatever. We weren't talking about how much it costs. We weren't talking about trying to sell your client these crazy papers and whatever. We were just, here's the project. And I think the economics of it are where things, where it's often neglected in school, or at least it was for me and so many of the people on the call.
Same.
And I think what that leads to, I'm reading this book right now called The E-Myth, and I absolutely love it. Check it out if you have a business.
Don't judge it by its cover if you come across
Please
it.
don't judge it by its cover.
It's a really bad cover.
Dreadful.
Easily the ugliest cover I've seen.
Sorry to whomever.
Yeah, whoever made it. I'm sorry, man, or person. Yeah, but man, I'm already halfway through. It's been a day. I've highlighted about
half of it so far. It looks like
every line, every other line. I was like, whoa, amazing. But one of the main points in it really stuck with me, and I was thinking about the conversation, engineers, designers, talking about how when you're running this business, and I look at a lot of engineers that aren't working for a studio as these independent businesses. And one question I have is, do they even think of it that way? Do they think of themselves as a business? Which is one, and that came up during Art Club as well. But also, what part of the business are you thinking you are? Because he breaks it down to three different ones: the technical, the execution, or the executive, and the managerial parts of the business. And oftentimes, he believes why businesses fail, and it was like the stats were insane. It was like 80 or 90% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years, like crazy. And he really blames the fact of the focus only being on the technical part of the business, and that the managerial aspect of processes or the executive functions of meeting with people, networking, growing the business aren't there, but they're really good at EQing, or they know every type of EQ you could buy. And so, I mean, the numbers are there. They're showing these businesses are failing. And I think a lot of why that might be is that you're not really taught that. You're really hyped on, the technical bits. So that really, that was probably the biggest,
That's really interesting, actually, as it pertains to this school problem, because if, let's say there's a cultural shift and audio engineers become more engaged in the business side of what they do, right? And they're starting to think, like, what really brought into focus this multi-generational business view approach is the design firm Pentagram. After much success, this became their new frontier, and their new challenge was, well, how do we design the growth models within the partnership to attract more partners and to be appealing to people so that they're motivated to climb the ranks. So they set out to make their company one that would survive over generations. And this is one of the things that I find, we're saying, like, audio engineers don't even know if they can have a career. They certainly aren't thinking about hiring an assistant, right? Or thinking in multi-generational terms. Yeah. But if we do, it's almost like there shouldn't be a professional audio engineer working without an assistant. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just, it should be assumed that is what the gig is.
It's part of the investment.
Yeah. And it's 2 and 3 and 4 generations.
Yeah.
Like, in one business, so that, you can move through the stages of your career and have more meaning, there's a lot there to unpack.
Well, it's like winemaking. It's like the passing down of there's a reason why the greatest wine families have survived generations, because
sashimi knives.
We had
anything.
We had a red wine this week recommended by that book that I bought that I told you about, Rajat Par. It's the first wine we bought out of the book, and the winemaker, he's very famous for his Hermitage wines. Mm-hmm. But his family started making Hermitage in 1400 and something,
right?
And continuous lineage, and it was incredible wine. Yeah. Turns out when you spend, couple of generations at it, you get pretty good at it.
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
so we're talking about multi-generational business, not based on family necessarily, not the randomness of sort of genetic relatedness. We're talking about ideas and principles and values and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And also systems. And I think that's something to me that as I was getting into freelance world that I admired and studied with John's work and what he's doing and the systems that he has in place. And I think, I don't know, often people are asking about your Trello board or something like that.
Never.
Right. And I think, again, that's not the technical. That's not you in Pro Tools. That's actually more of a managerial process. And there's these 3 areas of your business you should be focusing on. And if you're only focused on technical, that means you're not focused on the other 2, and you're not developing processes to make those just as good as your mix. So it's interesting to
I'm
me.
going to support the work.
Yeah. I feel like these words are sort of, when I think of a young engineer making hip hop records or whatever, and they hear the word managerial and process.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, this is not why I signed up for this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're thinking of something else. But
Not
I guess
thinking about discipline either.
Discipline either. But we need to make a case for.
We could soften the words if we
Well,
want.
no, I think the words
I
are
won't,
good.
but-
The words are-
Contextualize them.
We need to make
Yeah.
a
The words
case
are
for
good.
why, when you use a Trello board effectively, you get to spend more time in the room making records.
Right.
You get what you want out of life,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
So I love the way that he's speaking on it, and what I've taken away from it as well is like, look, if he's breaking it down by technical, executive, and managerial, and you want to be the technical guy, aka the person at the board or the desk or whatever, you can be. So who's doing the other 2?
Yeah.
If you don't want to.
That's
Right?
exactly what I was going to say.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you think about John's model, he has a manager. Someone's handling the managerial function. The executive
Scheduling.
function is split between Nathaniel and you. You're networking, you're meeting people, you're,
Strategizing.
marketing, all of that, right? It's like it's all being done, and it's a matter of, if you do not want to do this, which I thought was really interesting. He says, I was like, damn, what a fire line in this book. He says, if you just got into being a business just so you could be technical and not have a boss, it's self-indulgent. And I was like, bro, it's true. It's like you're making
kind of stings.
It's kind of stings. I feel pretty self-indulgent most of my life that I get to mix records for a living.
Yeah, but I mean, you have the business
Yes.
is a business.
No, but
it's
it's
a
being
functioning,
handled.
repeatable
Yes.
business that ideally,
What makes it self-indulgent is that it comes at a cost of something else.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
right. And so if your technical obsession / abilities come at the cost of the executive and managerial functions of your business, because it is a business. As soon as you start exchanging money for a thing you're doing, it's a business, whether or not you like the word.
Yeah, it's the definition
And
of being
so-
professional.
Right. And so I think to a young engineer, if you can get comfy with that word now instead of rejecting it, you're just going to be way more prompt.
also
for
really
success.
important.
It's identity
It
stuff.
also feels empowering.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
running your own business, and it can be a small business
Yeah.
of three people that
Sure.
are familial, and it can feel. I mean, for me, when I recognized that that's what I was doing, and I was trying to, bring up juniors and do the Tony thing, this feels great. It feels like a self-indulgent way of giving back. But also thinking about, I think my in those 3 points that you made, though my business model is working and I have sorted it out, my expertise is still in that technical, right? And I allow myself to exist in that 90% of the time by the other aspects of the business, being handled outside, but with my advisory nature to it. But something that Spider and I were talking about, which was when the technical has to go away, right? I don't think about engineering technically, right? I mean, yeah, if you're troubleshooting, that's, there's a technical approach to your the way you're going to implement your troubleshooting, and like, okay, in the signal flow, where is this going wrong? I had a noise on a analog vocal chain. I was like, oh, well, it's not the Unfairchild, thank you. It's like, oh, it's the Siemens EQ, and it was a cable loose in the back. Like, well, I mean, you're going to trouble. That's technical. There's nothing creative about your
And you have technicians supporting you.
Yeah. But when I think about the actual mix, I want to as fast as possible to be as creative as possible, get into the flow state, right? That's the overall goal of like the post morning routine, post email, post managerial conversations, and that part of the business is to get to the flow state so I could be performative in nature. As Spider has been putting it to me and making me understand that as a craftsman, where we're needing to be a performative. We're needing to have everything else out of the way. So when someone says, "Oh, why do you not compress? Why do you talk about the that you don't do this and you do this?" It's like, what do you mean? Like, I don't.
Yeah, what does that have?
What does that have to do with
it?
getting the song to sound right? And I sat today on this idea of kind of visualizing the topography of a mix as well as the topography of like a day, right? And that idea of balancing the natural and the synthetic. So like you'd have a map, and then you'd have a skyline of a city, but you'd also have mountains, like you're outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, like you're mapping that topography. At some point in the song, you're seeing a mountain, but then here the synth comes in, and it's like this wall of sound that is so surreal that it couldn't be. And you want to get to that, or I want to get to that nature of understanding that map of the song that can be a little bit more surreal and esoteric. But in order to have that consistent and to develop that form of creativity in your, because I don't know how many engineers think of themselves as creatives versus technicians. And I definitely sit on the side of like 80-20 creative to technician, because I know all the technique, but I also don't know the inner workings or how to build a compressor from scratch. Like I never care. I know Rory is the opposite. Like Rory definitely knows how to, you can build a mic pre if you were given the circuitry, right? I don't know how to do that. Could I have learned? Yes. My father built speakers when I was a kid. Like I could have done that. But so I fit on that side of things, but it's the way that the systems of the business run that allow me to do that to the most efficient way. And without that, you're spending too much time. Like that's why the Trello is so important to me. And I manage it every morning, and I look at it every morning. It's like, what is the deadline for this song? Who produced this song? Who do I have to reach out for? Or who does Josh or Ingmar have to reach out for the missing files so I can get this done by the deadline? All those things are part of being a reliable professional, as well as having that flow state of being creative and just thinking about that map. And it, to me, like the topography is such a really kind of distilled way of thinking about what a song arc can be and what are the obstacles in the way of the journey. It's a little different than just like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus.
It doesn't sound at all the way Pro Tools looks.
No, but that's how a song feels.
This is we've been distilling this concept for a very long time. It's like, I remember the first talk that we gave with Tony and the team at AES years ago in the PMC room.
Yeah.
We came away from it like, God, I wish people asked better questions.
Yes.
Right? And all of the questions are framed in the world of the Pro Tools screen, and it's in the technical, right? And it assumes that the answer to that technical question is the same as the answer to the bigger question about why, right? And so when people are mixing, it sounds to me like they are thinking that to deploy these techniques is how they're going to get what they're after, right? And it's not. And the way that you've set up the systems of your business and the systems of your lifestyle, John, and we all do this to some extent, but in this case, you do that to support the frame of mind that you'll be in when you're mixing, so that you can transcend the technical and experience the music more wholly, and with fewer distractions. And you have the technical things behind you. And so when people are asking you questions and it's not making sense to any of us what that has to do with the outcome.
I don't know how to answer them most of the time.
What I'm trying to do is bridge, because what you want to help people do is get that technical stuff behind them, right? And so I think
Fast as possible.
we need to do a good job of saying, hey, there's a there. If you can get this technical shit behind you, there's a there, and we want to talk about that. But we know you also need to spend time getting this technical stuff behind you. And so there's some techniques to learn. There's some tools to have. There's something there to talk about.
Yes.
But it doesn't have to do with the outcome in the way that most people are framing those questions. So I think we're continually bringing clarity to create those distinctions so that we can have opportunities to explore performance. Like, audio engineers aren't thinking of themselves in terms of performance, right? I think the artist does that. It's like, nah, man.
Yeah.
We're all living throughout the day, and that can take on different character.
Just trying to maximize the bounce of these records, right? You don't do that with understanding what a compressor does or to build a compressor. That's listening. That's ear training. That's being emotionally responsive. It's a different thing. And I think that, like you're saying, when I'm doing an interview or anything, I'm always asked what tool I use, and I'm like, do I have to answer that question? And not because I don't. Back to the secrets thing. It's not that I don't want to divulge the tools. It's like I don't think that's helpful. I don't think me telling you I use Saturn II on the bass is going to make your bass feel right. Like that's just never going to be the case. So this is kind of that middle ground of where like I want to talk about technique and tools and tricks with you guys in the conversation, but I also think it's more important to go down the hole that we just did. We're still kind of working it out, but it's something I live with every day now that I'm doing these lives every week and we're recording every week. Is it's really on my mind of when someone asks me a very specific question, I always try to reframe it another way that's going to actually
seems useful to you. Right?
Yeah. And that I would have gained knowledge from. I've never saw someone boost an EQ on a kick drum and thought, I need to do that to the next kick drum. Like that just never computed to me.
It's called an equalizer.
Yeah, it's, and what is it? I don't remember, again, using Tony for this. Like, I don't ever watch Tony and was like, oh, every bass sound, he boosts this or does this. It's always different. So what am I supposed to take away from that? That it's always different in the song and the part or what matter and the feel. But it just... When I came across that word in my head, it seemed to fit so many things because we're living in an age right now that there is nothing that is completely natural or anything that's completely synthetic. I always think about things like if I have a synth or something synthetic in the song, I want to approach the treatment a bit more naturally to it. And when I think of something that's more organic and natural feeling, I want to think about it synthetically, and I want to make it sound, larger than life. When we already know what a record sounded like from the 60s, there's no need to make the acoustic guitar sound like Bob Dylan. Like it just doesn't need to be fully that version of an acoustic. And I think about the way those things interact, and I think about the way it interact in my life. It's like, well, today I read a book, but I also listened to a podcast. Today I got coffee, and I also
while wearing AirPods.
Sure, exactly. Like there's always this duality that's occurring in our lives, and I think that kind of explains a lot about an approach to mixing. I don't think 4-bar loops. I think about bar 6 meeting bar 128 at some point. Like they have to connect, and along that line, there's ups and downs, and it's not just like a crest and a trough of a wave. It's just so bumpy, and at some point you get to this climax, and it gets juicy and it gets thick and dense and like all the right things, and it might clip at that point, and like there's this, it's okay that it does in that point because it's all driving to that point. But you don't do that technically, because if you come at it technically, you're gonna be like, oh, clipped at that peak moment, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
I can't
why
clip.
listen? Just do it by the meters.
Yeah, exactly. That's another whole thing. Like fucking paying attention to meters and having bad monitoring. So like your speakers are clipping. You don't even realize that you're like -10 instead of +4 on your input on your consumer level speaker or whatever you're using. And it's like, what do you're distorting the speaker, not the mix. And when you go listen to it in your car, you're like, wait, this is quiet and this sounds terrible. And you're like, oh fuck. So that's a whole another thing to talk about, that we have two experts at the table that can speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we could be here a while.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth talking about in a sense, the relying on meters when you have bad monitoring. It's definitely something we should get into at some point.
Yeah.
Monitoring is really important to me, and I keep talking about it on my weekly Instagram lives.
It's just a fundamental. You have to get it. You have to get it right before you can proceed to the next level.
How do you feel about? I keep getting asked. It's always in the comments. Budget monitors. How do you answer the good budget monitoring question when someone asks that?
What does that mean to you in a number? What's $500? What does?
I don't know what it means to other people. Like below 2,000.
A bunch of questions follow.
Yeah. Below 2,000, maybe.
It's always highly individualized.
But is it though? Like, are there just better?
Yeah.
Is there a there? Are Dyne Audio is at that price point better than KRKs? Like,
yes.
They are, right?
Yeah.
The mid-range is softer and more musical. Like,
It's a better engineered speaker overall.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I keep coming to, those guys, versus like the HS8s or whatever.
Yeah. The Dyne Audio, I don't know how they pronounce it, LYD, LYD 48.
Yeah, those.
Good little speaker, $2,000. The cheap JBLs, the LSR.
Those come to mind.
305s, 308s for like $300, $500, $600. They're pretty great.
You gotta love mid-range, but yeah.
It's worth touching on. It's like, I keep getting asked, and I don't know how to answer the question because I think that you don't get mid-range speakers, right? You get budget, something you can hear through, and you save until you can get great monitors. There's no middle road, in my opinion, at least. You get headphones, and then you get the greatest speaker that you can buy, and you have to come up with $5,000. And you have to save, and you don't buy the great mic pre yet. You wait, and you don't spend $2,000 on the mic pre, and you save that $2,000 towards a pair of great speakers. And then that should be the first purchase.
It's a way of investing in yourself.
Yeah. It's just, you can't move through the world of music and feelings if you can't hear it properly.
You can't determine if that preamp is the preamp you want or the microphone's the one you want if you can't hear truly what it's doing to the sound.
You can't choose the rest of the studio.
So that's how I always think about it. It's like, that's going to help choose the rest of your studio.
But if somebody asks, hey, my friend, he's a young mix engineer, he wants to get pro speakers, you just say, get fucking PMCs for $5,000, right?
Yeah.
It's easy. Maybe a sub, right? Or two, hopefully. But asking a budget speaker, it's going to be way more personalized than that. It's not an easy answer. I mean, I've recommended all kinds of things to fit a certain situation.
Depends if someone needs it to bump, if they're writing or, But what's really important is to just think of this speaker room thing as sort of just fundamental. There's no getting to the next level without it.
The studio is the room and the monitoring system.
The amount of energy you will burn through if you don't have those things in reasonable shape, it's just it will undermine the whole venture. You know what I mean? And I've done
really
that. I've lived that for many years. Yeah.
So given that they're different, is some advice maybe to try out a bunch and A/B them?
No, not if you can't. If you don't know what good is. Give me 1 second here. I wrote something the other day. I was telling you I wrote an Instagram post, even though I've never posted on Instagram.
Nice. He's warming up. He's warming up.
Here's a notes folder.
I can't wait until Rory posts.
So this is imagine this, and this was I didn't even edit this, so it's not ready to go. These are on individual slides. So people say if it sounds good, it is good. But what if you can't tell whether or not it sounds good? Maybe you don't have the experience to know what's good and what's not. Maybe you don't have proper monitoring or a balanced room. Maybe you're distracted by your phone, high or tired all of the time. A good snare sound for a trap record is not good for a power ballad, so context matters too. Consider making an investment in your ability to hear and to listen, and then you'll know if it sounds good, and consequently, if it is good.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that's all great. I just thought of a really great way to make a trap snare work in a power ballad.
Of course. Exception.
That's a puzzle John wants to solve immediately.
No, I already figured it out.
But yeah, so the problem is with demoing a bunch of stuff is that if you don't know what what good is, I can try a bunch of sushi knives right now. You put the 5 best sushi knives in front of me, or 2 bad ones and 2 good ones. I don't know how to fucking cut
I'll
sushi.
pick the sexiest one.
I'll pick the one that feels nice, or like I'll ask you which one is the best one.
I don't know how to evaluate a sushi.
No. I just cut my first sashimi with this new knife though, and it was such a satisfying experience.
Yeah,
I mean the texture of it was perfect. Like you learn how to cut against the grain, and you have a specific double beveled knife, right? That just
you're prepared to evaluate it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
you're in a position because you're cooking. I'm not. So that's my point, is that it's not useful to say to someone who doesn't know what good is to demo a bunch of stuff and pick which one is good.
And that's why the guidance from a distance doesn't work, because what you need is that experienced person in the room pointing things out, and no one else can. You can't do that.
That makes me think. That just made me think of a program, right? Like, we're talking about how school is not a great idea, but what about a school where 2 days a week, the same 10 people come in and Spider plays a playlist and was like, yo, check out that verb on this thing. Check out this. And to me, that's ear training, right?
Exactly.
Like, to me, the most important part of educating is, it's musical meditation, exactly. I think we think about the technical, we don't do the listening part. And when you're in music school and you're in doing a composition or performance degree at Juilliard or NYU or wherever you are, you're doing ear training classes 3-4 times a week. You're transcribing pieces of music. Why are we not being taught that versus here's a compressor, this is what it does, this is an EQ, this is what it does? Like, we need to know those. Like, I can't say that enough. You need to know the toolbox, and a hammer is a hammer and a fucking wrench is a wrench, and you're going to need them to put a table together. Like, this is not going anywhere. But when I think about, I was talking on live yesterday about phase, right? And sometimes a bass sound, if there's 2 basses, the mid-range, the upper mid-range growl of the bass is determined by it being out of phase with the sub layer below, right? So the minute that you flip the phase on the sub and you have extended bottom and true low end and arguably a better bass sound, you're now missing and you're hollowed out all that mid-range. So you have to have the ear training to go back to that rough and say, oh shit, that bass sound was like really tight, and now that I have low end, I'm missing this mid-range, and then devise a solution creatively to get that back, right? And that's not in audio school, but in a program that Spider has live at the gift shop, you'd listen to a record and you'd be able to flip the phase on a stem and show how that's possible and then how to remedy that circumstance, right? And that seems extremely valuable in a technical and balanced creative approach to mixing records and sound design, and what phase does to things, what anything does to anything, and really pointing it out. Ear training to me is the most important part of mix engineer.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about producers and their reference points, and they want a snare sound because they heard it on this record, and they are trying to achieve this thing. And that also had another question. This kind of fits, and I was kind of for the table, which is like, why do we like nostalgia? Like, why does nostalgia in music and sound affect us viscerally? Like, and your Spider, to me, like, that's been my ear training, is like, oh man, it sounds like, I'd do a move on something, we would work on a record, be like, oh, it reminds me of that so-and-so record from 76. And I'll be like, oh shit, I don't know that record. Play that record. And it's like, it's the same snare reverb. It's the same thing, but a more fully realized version of what I was going for. So now I can take it further and understand. So this nostalgia thing is calling to action.
The familiarity.
Yeah. How do you feel about that in
this
general?
Kind of school? This kind of idea?
No, not necessarily the school. I was kind of bridging two concepts here, and like the school and the ear, but mostly ear training, understanding the importance.
Oh yeah, I mean, you want to throw the teenage brain at this project of ear training.
Yeah,
like you want
with guidance.
Yeah, a guided, ear training in a monitoring environment that is uncompromised.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is, if you want to talk about rate of growth, I mean, I would think that's the formula. I mean, that was one of the most impressive aspects of what it was like to be at Juilliard, and to see these kids interact. I think we vastly underestimate what young people are capable of, and I would love to see a way where we could engage people younger, so they don't show up from Berkeley with the baggage, You've seen more than one rude awakening.
Yeah.
I've met a lot of impressive kids who've been through Berkeley too.
Same.
Sure, of course. I don't want to create a stereotype.
Yeah.
It's just an example. I mean, it's just when you're 22, when you're 22 and you've never actually been in a real session.
Yes, you've aced your classes and you've studied hard.
The opportunity to be ready for your moment. Like it's I don't know.
No, I think you're completely right.
It's a very serious topic because people's like school years, you don't never get them back,
Yeah. And
so I tread lightly on.
No, I'm glad I left when I did and opened myself up to criticism and someone saying, nah, try this. Like just that whole idea of that's tight, but have you tried this? Like, I love that idea. I also love that little bit you do this so well, Spider. You did it so well with me in general. Is this It's not the the subtle bit of validation of that's cool, but also there's this. Like, again, the same example of, oh man, that's reminding me of this. It's like, but once that's played, what you're actually doing, it's like a subtle form of manipulation with a positive outcome.
Yeah, we have a
shared goal.
It's toward a shared goal.
It's just like, that's really cool, but it's still not as cool as this, but it's making me feel this, but let's make me really feel
it's always
this.
what if.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
If there's something there, you play the reference in case there's something there.
And it's non-prescriptive. It's not you should do this. It's this could work.
Yeah.
I love that overall approach to learning and to exploration in general is maybe it's worth trying this. Just this. Now, granted, there's we talked a few weeks ago about divergence, and there's you can be really exploratory and never finish an idea.
That's the dance you do in the room.
Yeah.
That you don't see. This is okay. This thing we're doing in an environment where there are consequences, right? And that sharpens us, right? There are deadlines, there's this and there's that. This is something I suspect, I don't know it for a fact, but I think a major contributor to mental health is your relationship to consequences. So if you grow up in an environment where there are essentially no material consequences, like no dire consequences for you and your family, I think that you miss an important grounding aspect of life, right? And again, I don't know this to be a fact, but I suspect that like having like say you go to audio school where there aren't these consequences, right? Your whole game has not been sharpened in the way, like in the first couple weeks in the studio in LA doing real sessions, you get sharpened quickly.
Yes.
And I think that is actually a much broader issue, that comes from affluence and wealth and all this sort of thing. I think kids growing up without, if you don't gather firewood, mom's not going to have dinner tonight type consequences, like that there's this sort of frivolousness in the approach to life.
A non-committal thing. And
that leads to a kind of lack of meaning or something, or the kind of anxiety and depression somewhere in there. I it's a trailhead for me. I don't really know that much about that sort of thing.
No, it sounds really interesting and worth diving into.
Yeah.
I always referred to myself as a survivalist So I had to sharpen the tools as fast as possible so I can afford to live and to eat the rice and beans. So it has made me a converger for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I was 19 when I had my first paying client as a producer engineer.
Same, 19.
I was a teenager.
Yep.
It's like you get sharp real quick.
Yeah, and in my case, I don't know what it was for you, but I was getting a session ready to send off to a mixer, and the client was like, "Wait, what do you mean? Aren't you mixing it?" And I was like, "I don't mix, I record." He's like, wait, I was paying hourly for this. I thought you were going to also mix it today. I was like, wait, I don't never mix the record. He's like, well, you're about to. And like, it came out on iTunes a month later. But something I always talk about when I'm meeting with maybe a mentee or kind of anybody, and I probably talked about on this podcast before, which was in that moment when that came out, I didn't have any work for a month or so. I went back and I remixed that album. I would constantly go back and practice to really sharpen the tool, which was, I don't have time to do that now because I'm kind of working at a level of output that, I'm kind of getting hired. But I was talking to Ingmar, and Ingmar had a slow week last week, and he actually picked up a song that he had mixed that's already released and did this. He's like, I remember you saying that you did that. Like, I did that. Like, I remixed it to see with the new tools and a new approach of understanding, like, how could I have made it sound better? And did I approve it? And it was a wild improvement. And so that sharpening of the toolbox needs to happen all the time. Yeah. And a lot of the time it is based on survival. And there's also another conversation there that's taking gigs for money versus for passion, and that's something to tease out too. And I'm kind of had been on the take gigs for money side for so long, and I finally got to the other side of that. And so,
I had an experience this week of looking at the Instagram feed of a mastering engineer and the work that they had done in the week, someone who's working at a high level, and thinking, I don't know if I ever want to work on. If that's a good week, I don't know that that's the gig I want. Kind of like just...
You can have it.
Yeah, just the music wasn't making any sense to me.
What was it? What was the music?
It just wasn't connecting. It was just a bunch of kind of, I don't know, could have been my mood on the day too.
Yeah.
But it was a bunch of stuff. It was a mix of hip hop stuff and trap stuff and pop stuff. Sonically and musically unimaginative to me, but it was just kind of like, it wasn't like, oh, I can't wait. And some days you look at someone's feed and it's like, oh shit, that's a run of records I want to be doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And this was just the opposite thing,
Yeah. We're probably alike in the sense where if I saw that, I kind of can guess kind of where that's at and who it was. I want to work on those records in order to make them sonically more imaginative and see if I can get them across the line that way. Like that was my meeting with Nathaniel today. It's a challenge of how can we inject more emotional availability and imagination to these records. And it's a losing battle most of the time, but it sounds fun. And
it's great. It's working. You have way more control of those dials than I do.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a mixer, that sounds more interesting. And
it's just more possible.
It's more possible. Yeah.
I can't reinvent records.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The die is cast by the time it gets to me,
Yeah.
I wanted to follow up on Spider's point before. Just looked up some research on it to make sure it was academically sound, and it is. His hunches tend to be academically sound. But yeah, a study done in 2009. I don't know what school it was from, can't find that, but it said they basically tested students with two different tests, one that went towards their grade point average, one that didn't. And results indicated that the consequence of the test had a strong influence on motivation and a modest but significant influence on performance. Motivation and anxiety were found to have opposite effects on performance. And that's basically it. I mean, that's in the abstract.
That's the abstract,
Yeah.
I could read the whole study live if you want. Send me $10 on Venmo.
No, wait, is that going to gig now?
That's what I do. I just read academic papers.
Is that Cameo? That's like your version of
That's
Cameo?
my new version, academic papers.
Oh
me
God.
struggling through academic papers.
Oh my God. Oh man.
I just want to pivot back to this thing that you said about wanting to take risks, to make records, more emotionally available. And I love this idea. And it reminds me of more than a couple occasions, we've taken risks, or you've taken a risk in a mix where it clearly did that, but it wasn't accepted by the artist or the producer. And that always sort of baffled us. You know, it was like, yeah, but it's more the thing that you're doing, like the thing you made, it's more of it, and it's clearer, and it always baffled me when those instances would happen.
Yeah.
You know,
there's a lot to go on off that. I know what you mean. I still do it. The rate of understanding and approval of it has gone up. Maybe I'm just doing a better job at fully realizing the idea. Maybe people are more open to it. There's just so many ways into that, and I love this topic because I'm not going to give up on it. And it makes me think of the other night. You and me and Michael watched 2001: Space Odyssey, and like 10 minutes into it, I had this like profound moment of like, no rules, you know?
Yeah.
There's very little going on. And also to piggyback off of what Rory said with that thread of records coming out that you're like, I don't even really want a part of this. Like, I'm very uninspired by most music right now. And Christopher Nolan and you know, Kubrick and these directors are so inspiring, and going down these rabbit holes of directors, and that the way they think outside the box is like, when I come across a mix, I actually do think that I understand intention really well. I think that it's a thing I have. It's a thing I've developed. It's a skill set that, as a mixer and as a producer too, I say, oh, you were going for that, so let me see if I can take it even further. And last week there was a hook, there was a drop in a record, that crazy sick guitar riff that when the drop comes in on the rough, it's like this background part. And I'm like, what? Why did you put that in there so subtly when it's so musical? There's no vocal in this section. This is an instrumental bit. So I like crank that guitar up, and I it sounds nothing like the rough mix. And the response back from the artist is, y'all went in on that drop. That shit sounds crazy. It's like, well, that was in there. Like so that is an example of it working, right? The first mix after watching 2001 the other day, same thing. I was actually instructed by my friend, who the producer and artist is. I actually really like my mix. I've used kick drums that you've already mixed from previous, you know. It all, to me, the low end already locks. I would love you to add some detail to the top end, and to, you know, kind of do your thing, but I also really like what I have. Just know that I've learned a lot from you. You've influenced my sound. It was really beautiful. Like,
nice.
And it's nice. I just, as my friend, I was like, all right, cool. And I'm just going to mix it. And I explained my 2001 experience that night, and how I couldn't wait to jump in on this mix. And I mean, again, it just sounds like nothing like the rough in a sense. It's just so much more expansive, and got an approval really, really fast on this thing. And it's like, if you really understand it, it's worth a shot. To your point, maybe I'm just getting better at understanding the intention and going for it. And if it's fully realized, I think it's a no-brainer. But then I have also a note here that I wanted to kind of come to at some point. I think this is a good time. But like, artists and producers tend to have a negative, visceral reaction to change, where it's like, oh, it's different, so it can't be good. And that, to me, is demoitis. And I think it's like a real syndrome that I'd like to kind of understand a little bit more, because I think if you understand,
familiarity thing's probably playing a role there.
Yeah, and it's been familiar, but at the same time, like you're saying, so, you know, a really good, an easy example is you have a classic Juno patch that's like this saw synth with a chorus on. It's wide, it's Princey, and, you know, and they're doing these stabs in the chorus, and it sounds, you know, a little bit filtered. It's not quite the vibe that you're used to that sounding like, but all the information is there. And you go for that 1999 thing. And you give that attack, and they're like, yo, man, that synth's a bit bright now. It's like, wait, but that's the part. Like you're stabbing.
You
and it's
put the guy on the screen.
Yeah. So wait, you don't want, nah. I think it should be like, and then you put it back to how it was, and it just has no energy. And you're like, yeah, but you did that. That's uncompromisably your intention. Like that's the synth, that's the reference point. It's driving the record, and now it's not because of how it's sitting after you want it to go back because it's changed. I think that I get to that friction point a fair amount by being bold.
Yes.
And I wonder how many mixers and if they get there, and also if you understood demoitis as a syndrome, how you could remedy the syndrome with conversation. I don't ever try to convince someone that I'm right and they're wrong, but I do, if I have the opportunity to, over FaceTime or through email, explain my intention, which tends to prop up what I thought their intention was. And sometimes it's a victory in conversation. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, you're right. That's what I was. And it's like the minute you give their ego the boost of like, oh yeah, that's what I was going for. That was totally my idea and you made it better. But after that one pushback, it's just like, why was there the pushback to begin with? And that's kind of like a roundabout way to talk about what you brought up. Because like that's our job. Our job is to understand and elevate intention. And also, as an engineer, at least.
And you're doing a lot to engender trust. Like you're putting yourself out into the world. And I think the way people are coming into the mix is going to determine a lot about how they hear it.
That's what I was thinking.
So I think that what's happening in advance is more than any argument you could make after the fact. You know what I mean? It's the trust you have going in, I would think.
We've been having this experience going into rooms, helping people with acoustics, and it's just, depending on who referred us, like you with OG Volta, or different referrals we've had recently, or depending if they've seen the conversations video or not, the level of trust as we go in there is enormous, and it saves time, and we can get to the next level really quickly. And I think with you, there are people coming to you because they're choosing you because they like your aesthetic, they like the way you speak maybe about records or how you think, and they're bought in, and those people are much more likely to say yes to
they want to hear what
to
you're
a brave
gonna do.
move. Whereas, someone who's maybe the A&R picked you and the artist is like, I don't know, we used whoever on the last one.
Good distinction.
Like a
and then
trial.
they're used to, we've all had the experience where your record leaves your hands, goes to someone, mixing, mastering, whatever, additional production, comes back, and it's like they've broken it. They really have broken your record.
They didn't get it at all.
So people, like, if we had to say how many records left people's hands today and came back better, is it 10% of them? Is it 15, 20%? I don't know. But it's not 100%. We know that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of shitty work being done. So people get sort of reflexively protective. So I guess the game is to
work with people you trust.
Build
so you don't develop that,
or help your clients to trust
that
you.
Fear.
And like what you're doing, highlighting the things, finding shared common ground. The playlist that we use, the songs we'll use vary depending on the studio you're going in. We're trying to find a common language with people.
Yeah, that was my thing with that drop section in the record was like, no, y'all did that. Like, you guys did that, and then I turned it up.
Yeah.
And I made the riff more audible, intelligible, and feel like that's the focal point, right? Thinking again about the topography of the song. It's like that's an intense moment of the song. That's rocky as fuck. So like, let's turn that up and get the energy, and that's how you have to think about it. If they thought, oh man, I should just go back to how it was, it'd be like, well, then the song's boring. Then the arc of the song, like, it's just not right. It's just. You want to try to see the song from start to finish as exciting and energetic as possible, or as solemn and reflective as possible and emotional. Like there's
whatever it wants
to be. Yeah. And that a lot of the time falls in the hands of the engineer, right? That was historically our job. That's not as much anymore, because with arrangements and the producer is kind of locking things in at a certain loudness level and kind of boxing us in, it's not as much reliant on us, but I still take that responsibility. Like, that's why I'm supposed to touch this. That's why someone in the process said this needs to be mixed.
Right.
And I like to approach it that way, whether I do 2% or 20% of a lift. I'm going into it thinking I need to do a full facelift on this thing, like that I have the opportunity to do so.
I'm going to do whatever it tells me.
Yeah.
That's something that's come up over and over again over the years is, people ask questions, like the answer is always that the song is telling you. After the first bits come together, the song starts telling you what's up rather than the other way around. You know what I mean? You listen to it, and even the artist often isn't in control. It's like, well, I know you think this song is about whatever, but the song actually feels this way. Yeah. You know what I mean? It can be often it's a different thing than people set out to do.
Yeah, and I think that as an up and coming engineer, it sounds more more plausible that you'll kind of break through the noise if that's your approach. Then
find good songs and serve them.
Yeah.
Let them be, as Spider says, more themselves. Let them, elevate the good songs. And, good songs come from good artists.
It just seems like a winning approach. And as you get higher up the ladder in the pop music world, you do come across a lot more records like you're talking about that they kind of feel boxed in and unimaginative, and you're not going to win on those. And it needs to be decided if you want to spend that much time on those records. That was my conversation with Nathaniel today. It's like, I don't know if I want to do as much, straightforward pop anymore. Like, I do it, I like it, I value the people that hire me to do so, and it's just not always as fun. It's just like, that's all right. You just want it a little bit louder. That's not really what I do. I'm trying to make it bounce. And, you don't want to bounce? Well, maybe go to my competitor. Full circle back to earlier. I don't think of them as competitors, but, go to somewhere else. Like, I know so-and-so will kill this. Like, I should just be able to pass it off and feed another mouth, right? Like, let's elevate the community as a whole. I liked part of having the conversation nights here was getting to know more engineers, to kind of know people's fortes and pass work around and say, nah, my boy is over there is better at this than I am. Like, and how do we do that? Because I don't know everybody, and I don't know what people are good at necessarily.
What old school producers would do. They would know what engineer to put in what room.
Exactly.
Now we have to do it for each other.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that community aspect of knowing, but I feel like it's everybody kind of take what you can get right now, and I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the best approach to uplifting a community and adding awareness to what we do. I think we have to kind of come together a little bit, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
I was trying to find something about why artists have demoitis, and loss aversion obviously was the first thing that came to my head, and then I was doing a little Google Scholar, which is the scholarly journal search engine. And Kahneman, who came up with loss aversion, in one of his papers mentions the emotional attachment aspect, and that being sort of the reason. It's like, it's not just losing something, it's losing something that you're emotionally attached to. And it's because of that causes the loss aversion.
Actual grief.
Yeah.
You initiate the stages of grief.
Yeah.
Yep. That's fucking rough.
It's fascinating.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
It's deep.
That's what it feels like.
So it's interesting to think about it.
It feels like you bruised my baby.
Right.
Grief counselors.
Sorry, Michael, keep going. Sorry.
Yes.
I mean, Nathaniel's going to have to function as a grief counselor while delivering the mix. So incredible.
Mix doulas.
Oh, man. All right. Not to downplay any of that.
That's my new mix credit.
Yeah, mix a doula.
Yeah.
Oh my
that's Nathaniel's credit. Do you have to do it?
I want that for winning Mars mixing. Yeah.
Namaste.
Josh is mixing.
So I mean, like, I think it's helpful to note that there's science behind it. There's psychology behind this, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from an engineering perspective or from a creative perspective, like, if you're the one handing it off to someone, realizing that that's happening, and then if you're the one receiving the feedback, realize that's happening, and either prime them for
engender trust.
Yeah.
I also I do want to add that I'm not claiming that objectively I've improved the record every time. right? Like
True.
there's just no way to say that this is objectively better. I do think that at this point in my career and people that like me, that I do understand why I did what I did, and I do think that it is definitely improved most of the time in some way. So though I'm accepting of pushback, I don't want to make any claims here that like it's always better.
Absolute.
Yeah,
It's
it
absolute.
couldn't be, yeah.
Absolute at all, no.
But it is my job, right? And
Yeah.
I'm getting hired to finish someone's record. So
Yeah.
I've shown enough expertise in this that I do think that some claim is worthy of making.
You have to form a belief about it at
Yeah,
some
yeah,
point.
yeah.
I mean,
What? Say it.
No, I'm definitely far from agnostic on records that have little to no dynamic motion between sections. Like are good records. Like I am a believer that you need. And I know we've talked about this. Like there are non-dynamic records that feel great. I still think arrangement-wise that they are dynamic, so they
Yes.
lend themselves to
Totally.
be sonically dense and not moving. And the needles are pinned because arrangement-wise they're dense. So just not to conflate the two is all.
Yeah, totally.
But I think dynamics are necessary in a mix to be able to give your body a change in feeling to understand an arc and journey of a record. So that I think is like objectively true and should exist in every record that is made, and whether it's from a sonic perspective or an arrangement perspective. There should be some sort of emotional arc, and I do challenge myself to sonically inject that to some degree every time.
Figure out what it is and enhance it or bring it out.
And bring it out. I always talk about that I'm extremely subtractive in my processing. I try to be additive and feel and groove and bounce. That's
a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. I mean, that's the approach. That's what I've at least stumbled upon that I think that should be my approach. Yeah.
Huh. I also like thinking about the pop mix as letting more people in on it. It's like an inclusive kind of act.
Well, also what you've had a thing we haven't really discussed on as much on microphone, but we've discussed over dinners that popular music doesn't have to have layers of meaning to it, right? It can be very surface level, lyrically, emotionally, sonically, and it can still have major impact. I guess in my position, sonically, I would love to inject the possibility of hearing things in a pop music that you might catch in a Flaming Lips record or something a little bit more obscure and left, that you're like, oh wait, that little ear candy over there. And it's a sonic journey that you could find if you chose to, if a fan of the song went a little bit deeper in a pair of headphones and, heard this delay throw over here or heard this subtle panning move that is an artistic choice but unnecessary for it to
function.
for it to function
As a pop hit.
And I think you can get away with not doing any of that and it winning at the same time. I'm just always going to fall on the line of wanting to put a few of those moments.
We like the Nolans and the Kubricks who can make blockbusters, who embed puzzles and and create passages for people to,
that's what's so
alternative
passages.
inspiring
about these films that we've been watching is that they have their $1 billion grossing franchise, but they're deep as fuck, man. And you can study them. I mean, you can go down rabbit holes, and like I studied the great mix engineers and I studied great pop mixes because there were these three-dimensional. I mean, I think there's a fourth dimension, but that's another conversation to mixing. But those nuances, those things that I don't hear in overly compressed, aggressive pop music, the unimaginative records that we're talking about. It's like, and they do function, and they might do extremely well, but taking them that step further isn't going to make them do less well.
Yeah.
The song is the song. It's been written, it's been produced to be a hit. let the sonics take you on a journey as well if someone wants to. And that's kind of the place I'm coming from. It's not going to hurt. That extra level of dimension, that back wall and that audibility of the back wall or that tangibility of it, that feeling is not going to detract from its success. Doesn't have to be mixed for compressed radio. Radio has compression algorithms already there, right? So there's room for it to exist on Tidal or Spotify or Apple Music in a more high resolution way and also win. Right?
Totally.
Something I think about pretty regularly.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think that's a central plank of your thing. It's like, no, the sweet spot is here. It's not over there.
And it's I know other people are attempting this too. I think I'm kind of doubling down to a degree where I'm just like, well, if it doesn't win that way, I don't really want to be a part of it. Versus other people aren't in the position that they can fully do that yet. But I hear some things coming out and I'm like, oh yeah, you could have went a little further, but that's pretty close. And I kind of want to be a mix doula for those things. Can you be a consultant for adding the third dimension to mixes? And anyway,
I think you kind of are. Really?
Well, I mean, I can't be unless I'm in dialogue with people,
Yeah.
Because I think if I was able to, I talk about this as well, like when someone asks me for notes, and you say this a lot too, like the 7th track on the record that you're mastering, the weird one is the one that you point out that's dope. Like when someone sends me a mix for feedback, whether it's through a DM or an email, and I actually have time to listen to it, and I'm trying to find that difference, that differentiator in them to point out. And that's what I do when I mix a record. It's like, oh, that's that weird. Why is that turned down? That's tight. Turn that shit up. Like Michael was at the table. We were having dinner one night and Josh, we were having sashimi the other night and Josh was prepping a song and there was this weird background vocal. And Michael was like, yo, that shit should be loud. It's like super hidden in the mix one. And the whole record comes in. He goes, wait, that's the same record? Like, that's not the record. Yeah. The record's all the weird shit he was soloing. It's like, that's what I always think too. I'm like, no, that's super cool. I've never heard that before. Like, let's focus on that. But if you're in a room with Spider and I, and you're getting an ear training and we're soloing stems on a Bruno Mars record, and we're like, yo, check out what they did to that thing. Maybe you didn't notice it. Maybe you didn't know that it was possible. Like, I actually wonder if, like, as the world opens again, if we can do that. If that's a thing that conversations can offer, like once a month ear training sessions, or once a quarter or something, where we like have 10 people come to a studio, whether it's here or another room that we have. That's like pretty uncompromised when it comes in the grand scheme of things. Like, can we listen to records and just everyone brings a song and 10 people and we just go through it and we just talk and geek out about
hang
and like with some wine, even though that's not good for while you're mixing. But it just sounds like another cool night that conversations can offer for ear training. And I would be nowhere without listening to records and really analyzing.
It goes back to, knowing what's good. And generally a good way to learn is from people who figured it out. Get around smart people and listen. You know what I mean? You can think about it and read and research and do a whole lot of work, or you can get in a room with someone good for one day. Yeah. And you get these sort of
experience.
Quantum leaps forward where it just sort of all the other stuff falls away and you see what matters. And often it's just in like, you do something and they're like, nah. And it's like, oh, okay. All right. So now we don't have to go all the way down that blind alley.
Yeah.
We know that it doesn't work. So let's focus on what does matter here. You know? And it might not be the attack time on the compressor for half an hour. You know what I mean? Might be, but it probably won't be.
It probably won't be.
Fast, medium, or slow.
It probably won't be. I was wondering if Michael thought, what's so funny?
He's dying over there.
Nothing.
Having so much. Honestly, I'm having a lot of fun skating around the technical, like in these conversations. Like sometimes I want to go further into it, and it feels good, kind of playing acrobatics and kind of dancing around it.
I feel like there's no value in the technical unless we can go to kind of the firmament, unless we can hit bedrock on a technical issue and sort of establish something once right, so that you can do it and forget about it. So like monitoring feels like that to me. It's like, there are approaches to getting your monitoring right once, and then you should stop thinking about your monitoring. You should, get back to the conversation we just had about songs and intention and feeling and, and I feel like that with kind of any technical aspect of like ways of thinking of it is like, there's stuff we can talk endlessly about things we did or watch people do on different records, but it's like ultimately you sort of, I feel you want to give people an understanding of something and then stop thinking about it. It's probably a good point to touch on the actual topic we decided to talk about tonight, which we haven't, but we've kind of been in the vicinity of all night, which is the learning, on your own or with people. You had a much sexier way of saying it, Spider. What was the
personal development versus mutual development?
Yes,
okay.
personal development versus mutual development.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that getting a cohort, getting a group of people that you go on this journey with, could shorten it a lot and make it easier and more fun. Of course, maybe not if everyone's lost, but if you can get in the room with the right people who can help you refocus on the right things and point out, bring in mixes that do inspire. So it's like, if you and I wanted to find records that don't inspire us today, it's like it's endless. But we would all be much better served saying, hey, I liked this, and hey, I liked this, sharing good stuff, so finding a group of people around you that are excited and can move through, the journey together, I think.
Yeah. That's the lateral version of the hierarchical one, multi-generational one we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Right? So you want to be in those situations where you're learning from somebody who's further down the road than you, and they're learning, they're getting a fresh perspective from you because you're younger. But also imagine 3 of your friends also assist master engineers, what the 4 of you could do together, if you linked up once a week and
with a real commitment.
Yeah, with a real commitment.
Rather than a kind of a sort of a shoulder shrugging type, like a real commitment to like, hey, we are going to try and get better together.
Well, I did this with Tyler Johnson, the beginning of my career with Tony. He was laterally studying with Jeff Basker at the time, right? So I was up in North Hollywood with Tony and Spider, and Tyler was in Venice at Jeff's spot. And man, 5 or 6 nights a week, we'd meet back at Tyler's studio in his garage in the house he was renting. And we would sit there and talk about what we learned from the day, how our sessions went, and dissect what was going on, and both like intently listening to each other and pushing each other and asking questions and being curious in order to elevate and understand our potential in these rooms and what we could offer, what they're offering us, and really understand it. And that's something I couldn't imagine getting any other way. That real-time feedback every day. It was my house was kind of, his house was on the way home, so we would just stop there and have a conversation, have a drink or smoke a joint or something.
It's a lifestyle.
It was. I actually think I haven't really thought about that in this context yet. I think that's like probably one of the most important things that I subscribe to in my early development with a mentor specifically, and kind of meeting up. That's life changing for me.
Yeah, it sounds like you're describing feedback loops,
Yes.
I think the importance of the feedback loop is really where what you described as mutual improvement is happening, especially if you and someone else or you and a group of people are trying to improve in the same area, then it's easier to spot maybe gaps in areas that you both need feedback in, or one person might need feedback in over the other. Yeah. Because you're both kind of on that same mutual improvement.
Yeah, same age, both with mentors that are masters in what they do, offering their expertise to us. It was like a crazy, we both were so grateful, and we'd express that, as well as to take it very seriously and understand our position there and our growth there. It's that's complete mutual development. I mean, that's never really thought of it that way, because you're constantly being told that you need to self-improve, right? That's the narrative that we're given with these books and
individualization. And,
it's an important perspective.
You said a couple weeks ago at dinner something about this, that I wish I could say it as well as you did, but talking about that, how there really is no self improvement because we're, oh man, how did you talk
I mean,
about?
because we're always in relation to other people.
Yeah.
And, so it never happens as an island. And I was actually writing earlier today about conversation and where growth is. We talked a lot about how growth isn't really happening when you're at the computer trying out and copying all these plug-in chains that other people do. It's in conversation with other people who also do what you do, where the collision of ideas happens. And so where the collision of ideas happens, that's where the stuff that bounces around in your head you don't even know is an assumption is challenged, right? It's where the flaws in your sense making are sort of filled in by somebody else's perspective, right? So it's like the necessity of conversation for growth makes it immediately transcend a single person,
Right.
as a function, like as a complex system. So I think the commitment that's the big piece.
The big piece.
The big piece, because John and I started having casual conversation in the studio, and gradually it was a spontaneous sort of professional relationship that grew. It actually wasn't necessitated by the situation, but we were just attracted to the act of it, I think. The discoveries that were being made, and it was sort of like there was enough there in terms of optimism around what the relationship could bring, that we just sort of realized we were in some kind of committed relationship.
Yeah.
It just kept going on and on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
And good things kept happening.
Right.
But what the four of us are doing is, we're not only committed to doing this thing, we are systematizing it. So we are automating processes that allow us to bring value in the moment. And so the commitment unlocks a level of investment from everybody where, I'm really curious to see and learn more, from experts or whatever guests we can bring in, what collaboration and this sort of mutual development, what advantages there really are. Because it seems pretty clear that organizations can do things that individuals can't, right? Getting to the moon, you know what I mean? Organizations can do incredible things. So it must be true at a smaller scale. If you look at bands, for instance, there's something sort of magical about a band that can stay together, long enough to have a decent body of work. And
creatively fire off each other.
Yeah, and innovate. And, it's just, there's some, I don't know, I think there's something there to be learned at first principles level too.
It's rare to see, just a quick aside, it's rare to see a top song, a top record with one person that created the whole thing. It just, when was the last time you really saw written by, produced by, performed by, mixed by, everything by one person? It just doesn't happen that way. But to juxtapose that thought to the self-development part, there's work to be done on I hate referring to the self. There's work to be done on the individual, at the individual level, to be the best version of that self in the collaborative process, right? So there's meditation practices, there's intellectual hygiene, there's sleep, there's all of these things that inform the ability to be maximized in that position in the band. So they do coexist. I don't think it's one versus the other.
Yeah.
I think
but there's no mutual development section in the bookstore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What a bummer.
That's the thing. It's I think all the self-help stuff, I think if it were framed in this mutual way, it would.
Well, I think there's just a very perverse and massive incentive to isolate people. They're much easier to sell to when they're separate. And I think that it sounds sort of cynical, but it's true. You know, the market wants us atomized, and groups collaborating together need less stuff. You know, if we've got one good mic pre between three buddies, and we're talking each other
there
down.
it is.
You know what I mean? So
Mixed down industrial complex.
the
at its
incentives-
finest.
the incentives are to separate people, and of course, this, you know, there's no one in a boardroom planning this in a mic pre manufacturer. It's not some evil scheme.
Of course not.
But the nature of the market, the nature of capitalism, is that we're constantly split from each other and isolated, so that we can consume.
Yeah,
you know, and I think
cells
it's
are better than one.
Yeah, I think it's very real, and people who are doubting themselves, and you know, there's no you know, fashion magazine saying, you know, you should get together with your girlfriends and tell each other how great you are. It's always splitting people up and sort of, you know, instilling insecurity and then selling the product to fix it.
So to fix
you.
Yeah.
And the same is true in our world, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that can't be underestimated. It's just everywhere, and we don't think about it. It's kind of in the water, but it really is part of the modern, you know, and that's why.
That's just how people are in the modern environment.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
And again, my perspective on that is slightly different coming from outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's much more pervasive and powerful here than it is in Ireland or in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's just a different rhythm to life there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's also something that I can't imagine doing well without my team, right? So it's still something inherent that we all are aware of, right? Like,
well, there's two different things there. There's the team of running. You've got the team for running your business, which is like the business is established. You're somewhat realized in your abilities, and you've got a functioning business and teams and different people. But I guess what we were talking about earlier was sort of on the journey of finding people and committing.
well, I was going to get there because I'm thinking about COVID. I'm thinking about audio movers, Listen to, and I'm thinking about collaboration. I'm thinking about the cloud that, you know, Pro Tools has installed that I don't think really works very well. But Ableton, like, you can open up sessions at the same time with other people. Like, there is a trajectory towards collaborative, the collaborative nature of music making, of art making, right? So Joseph Gordon-Levitt was just on Andrew Yang's podcast 2 days ago, talking about when he started hit record, and it was this idea of like, you know, he recognized that people wanted to. It's like Animal Collective, like back in the day, right? Like someone did one part in Sweden, another person did it in Chicago, and like everyone was sending these bits and parts in. They'd never even heard the other version, and then you're collaborating. Like, we know that collaboration is inherent in humans. Like, we've collaborated to take bones and build housing, you know, to survive the cold night. Like, we've been collaborating
Ever since bacteria.
So yeah, that doesn't fit with the capitalism model of two cells are better than one, but it doesn't mean that you can't take both those cells and come together and now have two mic pre's, right? So the team could have two, and still, right? And I just love the idea of thinking that way, that there's nothing wrong with you both buying the mic pre because you were sold on that.
I love the pressure that it puts on your choices, on who you invest in and who you spend time with and who your influences are.
Yeah.
Rising.
Because if you, let's say you're a young engineer, teenager, in 10 years from now, and you're like, yo, I got to find my four, or else I'm not going to be able to compete with all the other kids who do. You're going to pin your hopes and dreams on, you know, these relationships. And obviously, you know, they're not all going to last forever. They should only last as long as they're useful.
That was very Francis Mallman of you.
Well, yeah, I mean, they are
the utility of relationships.
They're horizontal relationships that have a purpose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't need to make it sound bleak.
No. But I think it's
but yeah,
something worth understanding.
Yeah. You know, I don't know.
Well, I think of maybe someone that's been doing this for 40 years, 30 years, let's say 30 years. And like, oh, as a mix engineer, I always mix for so-and-so. And it's just like, well, maybe so-and-so wants to hire the young guy now. And it's like that relationship now becomes, we get wine once a week. And like there's utility to relationships, and they turn into other things. They evolve into other things. And that engineer now goes, oh yeah, I understand, for you to stay relevant, you need to go with this person. Like there's this mutual respect. And I don't think it's bleak and negative to say that people's relationships change utility. They don't have to dissolve completely and like, oh, that person means nothing to me. It's not, I don't see it bleakly. I see it as evolution. And I just, I don't know. I just wanted to.
Yeah, no. I find Malman practical as well.
Yes,
I know that he sounds harsh to some people. It all sounds rather practical.
Yeah. I don't know. Collaboration is where it's at, right? We can't do it without collaboration.
But making good choices with who, like that takes some, especially when you're young, it takes some real self-examination. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people haven't had these kinds of relationships modeled for them. You know, they're on a different part of the developmental curve when it comes to relationships.
Sure.
So you got to do the best you can. But knowing that those choices are important is the start. And if you don't know that, like, I think there's a lot of sort of random proximity that goes into the teams that form.
Yeah.
In the early stages. You know, it's sort of where you grow up or where you're going to school or whatever. Sort of determines these things, but knowing that you can be deliberate in this choice and that you should be seeking out, you know, the best people, you know, like the way musicians think about it. You know?
Yeah, but also like the way you seek out a mate.
Yeah,
you know,
sure,
someone that's going to be extremely intimate with you. These are parallel.
It's partnership.
It's partnership.
Exactly right. Yeah,
I mean, there's friction in the room, and you need to know that the relationship is strong enough to withstand that friction and that stress and come out the other side learning something from it. Or, you know, this is a text conversation I had with my girlfriend today, just how beautiful that is, that something can feel so foundationally stable. So in moments of friction, you can almost expect growth. Like there's going to be, and I hate using the word expectations. I don't like having expectations in general, but I think that when a relationship is fundamentally strong, you understand that there's a common goal and there's a common output that you're looking for. That's how, like, you know, we've talked about earlier tonight. That's how our relationship started. That's how mine and Tyler's relationship started. That's how mine and my closest collaborators' relationship started. Is at the end of the day, you know, we both want what's best for the song or best for the relationship or best for the meal. If you're a sous chef with the, you know, with the chef de cuisine,
all of the above at the same time.
All of the above at the same time, exactly. That's what we all, the people that strive for greatness, that's what we want. And it could get heated at moments.
Yeah, you're pushing limits.
You know?
Yeah, hell yeah.
And that's something that Rory brought up earlier that we kind of skated over, which is like, well, when do you take a break or when do you push through? Like, when do you take a pause and say, all right, that was a little intense. It's probably time to go get an espresso, or maybe we actually don't need caffeine. Maybe we, you know, maybe we just need to walk around the block or just to clear our heads. And when you know that friction is actually fueling the fruit of what's to come. And that's an understanding that you can only have with intimate partners.
Well, you do this taking risks with mixes, right? You're willing to accept the potential conflict from taking a mix wherever it takes you. It's gonna not be accepted every time, right? But you're comfortable with that level of conflict because in the end, it's better for everybody, right?
Yes,
that's a very
it's better for the song.
Yeah,
and that's what matters. The song is what matters. Yes,
yeah, that's cool.
No, I know. I guess I never really thought of that because I still send every mix being like, well, I hope they like it. You know, I don't really have the confidence sending it every time. You know, it's always like, oh, well, that's how I think it should sound. You know, you know, I don't know if that's ever going to go away though.
No,
doesn't.
that's just part of being hungry. And
Yeah, I kind of like that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
part of
I
it.
remember Dave saying to me one time, he's like, if that goes away, you should probably stop.
Right.
You know,
Interesting.
that's part.
That sounds pretty romantic.
No, it's part of caring that you're never
I
never
hope
sure.
they like it.
No, I mean you're never.
Like I hope there's no notes.
You can't be sure.
You know what I mean?
No, that's different.
No,
You know, I'm just saying. There's like a.
I like
there's
notes. I like back to collaboration. I
There's
like
a
notes.
spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
No, I suppose it's you just can't know that they're going to like it. Even
Well, of course not.
Yeah. So it's
yeah.
there's always going to be an
But you
element
can
of
accept all alternatives in advance.
yeah.
You see what I mean?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
That's what I mean by it going away.
Yeah, because there's a bigger piece here which you're pointing out, which is the being okay with friction, with the potential of negative feedback and confrontation and conflict.
You
and,
accept it as a necessary part.
yeah, and instead of thinking of it negatively, that could be the route towards the better outcome versus being feeling the pushback as you're not good enough, or it's more like it's still not right yet, and it could be met with, I see what you were going for, can we take it further? Or I see what you were going for, let's go back to how it was a little bit, and just opening the dialogue before closing it by saying, oh no, I'm insecure, I don't like conflict, I don't know how to handle this. And it's something that you have to practice. It's this like Eric Weinstein talked about, that he truly believes that confidence is something that you can learn. And I never knew that, and I've become, as my friends at the table, I'm sure you've understood this and learned this with me, but I've become a lot more confident than I was only in mixing, but but it's something that can be practiced. Like you just you assert and you take the feedback, and then you get the feedback and you grow from it.
Notice what happens in your body while it's happening. And, you just fucking move on.
But that visceral reaction to the feedback that doesn't really go away. There's still like a, fuck, I didn't show up. It's like, man, I thought I did. Like there's still going to be that.
For now.
Yeah. Well, I also learned something from, it was, what was his name? Josh Dubin with Jason Flom on Rogan's podcast, the attorney, talking about, oh wait, was it that one? Oh man, there's so many podcasts it might've been that one. It was it was definitely a Rogan podcast. And the idea that we actually need to be agitated as adults in order to retain and learn a new thing, right? So like after the brain develops, right, it's hard, you can't like learn a second language, right? It's really hard to learn a second language. But actually you can, but you actually have to have a mixture of agitation and acetylcholine, right? So these two things have been proven to show that you can actually learn new things and learn them well, efficiently, and quickly.
So Gilbert Gottfried and omelets is the solution to learning new languages?
I love that.
What do you mean agitation? What does
Agitation, like in a heightened state of awareness, like you're
so like in another country. Like if you're in a foreign country,
it was
the
the David Cho episode. That's what that's what it was. Sorry, it was that episode. Yeah, he's like out there in the wilderness. No, what do you mean another country? Now I'm confused what you're talking about.
It would like put you in a heightened state of self.
Oh, being out of your comfort zone.
You're trying to order lunch. You're hungry and you need it, and
it would disrupt your normal patterns.
Yeah, I think he's talking more about like a Jocko sensibility of like
shock and
physically shocked. Yeah, definitely. That's what he's talking about, like a heightened state, like military practice.
Jeez.
Okay. Where you're viscerally like agitated,
and then the drill instructor screaming in your face, and like, okay,
that's what he was talking about.
That facilitates learning.
Yes,
as long as there's eggs.
Yeah, as long as there's eggs.
Omelets.
As long as there's acetylcholine in that's this expansive brain adaptation to new information coming at you that you will retain with proper sleep, of course.
So anyway, it seems like raising the stakes again.
Yes.
like consequences.
Yes, consequences. Yes.
Perceived consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
That you will.
That ties in beautifully.
Yeah. So
It's the emotional. So memory and like emotional intensity correlates with like stickiness of memories.
Yes.
So it's got to be something to do with that.
Yeah. So that's thinking about conflict in that nature. Like you might in that moment actually learn the thing that's going to take you to the next level because you're agitated in the room and something's not right. Something's unsettling.
The incentive to learn it.
Yes.
Interesting.
And since I heard that, this was like a week or two ago, I've welcomed agitation a little differently. Like I'll before a mix, like I'll go bike up the hill like 10 times and like get really fucking like I'll do 50 push-ups really fast, like not do it with the proper form of trying to like go slow. I'll like go really fast and try to agitate myself and get and then eat eggs. Eggs every day. Or alpha GPC. I mean, he says they're kind of one and the same. So just whatever it is. But I thought it was interesting to know that we're constantly told this narrative that it's really difficult to learn things post a certain brain development. And I found it interesting that it was possible to do that. And then people are doing this, specifically in the military. That's like kind of what he was talking about.
Yeah.
It's still memories and make and reshape.
Yeah. Followed by a good night's sleep.
Yeah, followed by a good night's sleep. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just like that idea that you can enter a room that might seem uncomfortable with a collaborator, but you're almost there for that reason.
And that
again, the sleep quality thing can't be underestimated because apparently you go into high speed repetition of the thing that you did that day.
Yep.
And the anticipation of doing it again. So like rehearsing for the future. And so if that night's sleep is fucked up, like that stuff doesn't happen well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also, let's be real. After a good workout, if you're getting your agitation from a good workout, your body's tired. You're probably going to sleep well. I've been experimenting with instead of doing morning bike rides in my routine, doing them at night.
Wow.
Feel like my sleep's better. I'm exhausted, and I don't wake up to pee in the middle of the night. I'm just like completely out, and I'm just experimenting with it because I'm actually really good at sleep. I value sleep, and my sleep has been pretty good for the last couple of years since I've cared about it.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that it's a different level of sleep when I'm working out at night instead.
Wow.
And I remember like I've absorbed more from whether it's a podcast or a movie that I saw. Like I have a terrible memory. Like it just sucks.
I know Rhonda Patrick got into some research that showed meditation followed by exercise improved the effects of both.
Yes. That's my morning routine because of her.
I like that morning sequence too.
Yeah. I wonder if both matter or doing meditation, doing it at night before sleep. So meditate, that then exercise, then sleep. I wonder where that really fits in.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I always meditate before I exercise because of her.
Yeah.
And I love that. And then I get right into work and I'm inspired. And it's like my conversations with clients go smoother because I'm just operating at a level of maybe more connectivity and openness and willingness to have any sort of disagreements and conflict and just kind of
welcoming conflict. I think that's an interesting thing. And I think you can only do that if you've made good choices in your relationships, and that and actually having those sort of common goals or common vision for what you're building. I think it's a really interesting orienting factor.
Yeah.
In a committed relationship.
And
commitment just to be in a room just isn't enough. Like you need a project.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that framing is super important, and some conflict is useless. Some conflict is just wasted energy.
Sure.
And knowing when that's the case and moving away from it, and
like bickering over what route to take when the GPS tells you where to go.
But
on the way to the coffee shop.
But a waste of time in the context of the mission statement of your project or whatever your stated goals are.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, what if that's interesting. What if the goals are not stated? Sometimes you're in a collaborative effort in a room and with an artist or a writer that you never worked with before, and there's just like, whatever, man, like let's just go for it. It's like that's a lot of the time, that's when these conversations and these conflicts come up. When you don't have you haven't had lunch with this person, you don't know them at all. And magic can happen in that circumstance as well. But you're more likely to have friction and conflict because you don't know each other.
Yeah.
You don't know where each other's coming from.
Or at least you're not on the same page,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are plenty of strangers that we could jump in the room with, if they were recommended by a close friend or something. Right?
Yes.
It happens to us. We go in rooms and it's like, all right, it's our people.
Yeah.
We know how to function here.
And I'm sure there's the opposite too.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's just the trust factor. How quickly can you build trust with that person?
But the framing, I'm struck by sort of something you said maybe 3 or 4 episodes ago. How you frame adversity really affects its utility in your life. You said it a different way, but if you are in that room and you kind of go, well, okay, I can avoid conflict here. I can play it safe and pull up the safe patches on Splice and, kind of say nice things, whatever, just play nice. Or I can make a ballsy move and own the consequences. You know what I mean? And sort of but like in advance say, hey, I'm cool with this going wrong,
I like that
you could
one.
be real or not,
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
And again, we're back to service, industry, artisan, and that sort of where you're trying to land on it. It's not appropriate for the intern to be making those moves, and it's
but they should have opportunity to in their own time or whatever. Practicing that.
You go to Starbucks,
somewhere.
you don't want the barista's input on what it is you should choose.
What do you mean? Wait, what do you mean when I? Okay.
Starbucks.
Okay, sorry.
It's a very
I was
much
thinking
a
of like
service.
when I go get an espresso, I ask the barista what if they have options. Like,
Totally
give me your
different-
preference.
different
Not
deals.
Starbucks.
Not
Yeah,
a
different deals.
service. That's not service.
Oh man, guys, I'm
That's artisan.
so into this Scandinavian coffee right now. They're just doing wild things. Today, I made first espresso from Tim Wendelboe from Oslo. And I pulled this shot and I just yelled, wow. And Josh was like doing stems, like, you okay? I was like, dude, this espresso's crazy. He's like, yo, make me one. Make him one. I swear to God, I walk over, he goes, what the fuck? And he starts laughing. He goes, I don't know why espresso's making me laugh. This is crazy. Like, I can't describe. It is by no means subtle. Like, this is what I'm talking about. It's this bold approach it was sold to me as most people are not going to like espresso, this espresso. But for those that love espresso, you're going to fuck with this espresso. Man, this shit is crazy. And I mean, it's like a funky wine that you're like, this isn't going to be for everybody, and it's like a funky mix, man. Like you gotta go for it. Like I'm trying to relate it to this. I actually have no interest in relating it to a mix right now. I just want to talk about coffee.
It's just what those coffee beans wanted to be.
Yes, and we were talking, and I bit into the bean just to see what's inside, and it's light colored inside. It's this really unique approach to not fully roasting the bean, and there's like, it's not green. It's not a green bean inside, but it's definitely lighter than a fully roasted bean, and it's bold, and it's like this raisin, blackcurrant, Indian spice, like in coffee, like this flavor you've never tasted in coffee, and it's bold and it's exciting, and
It perfectly illustrates the difference Rory is pointing out about like the Starbucks service oriented versus the artisan passion driven approach.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there's an interesting parallel with, like that, with a coffee bean like that, or a wine coming from a serious vineyard, that the people making it are looking for the perfect expression of the terroir. They're not looking to impose sort of anything on
profile
it.
on
Yeah,
it.
it's that thing of, at a certain point, the soil is telling you what the wine is going to be. And at a certain point, a song is telling you what it needs, not the other way around. It's like,
you're trying to get out the way.
Yeah, you're trying to get out of the way, And that's a really important, I think I've seen over the years a lot of people sort of still in ego mode, still in like, oh, I control this, I make this. And it's like, really beyond a certain point, it's the song is telling you what fits or doesn't, it sort of has taken on a life of its
own.
own.
It's a natural resource that isn't respected.
And for me at my end,
it should be.
Like I'm all about preservation of that. It's like, what can I do to fix the issues, make it loud enough, and preserve all of that. All along the way, other people have crafted it and written it and engineered it and mixed it. And then it's like, how do I not break it and still achieve what we need to do, you know? And maybe eke out a few improvements too.
Yeah. But hopefully.
Yeah, little ones, subtle enhancements, you know?
I'm actually really just thinking about that in the wine, the terroir, and the story that is being told. I actually find myself being intrigued. Tomorrow night, I'm going to Sammy Whitty's house. He sent me a picture of a bottle of wine, and he said, "Sounds like something I should open with Castelli." And I was like, "Cool, I'm there." And it's a winemaker in Bordeaux. I don't know much about Bordeaux, and I sent Rob Moose a photo of the wine. I was just trying to get a story and background. He goes, "Oh, this is really interesting. It's a red winemaker in Bordeaux, Chateau Margaux, who is notorious for making great red wines, making a white wine." So there are a lot of like Uli Stein only does Rieslings.
It's the actual Chateau Margaux?
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah. You know, they're heavy hitters.
Yeah. It's super. I'm super excited. But it's a red wine winemaker expressing themselves with a white wine grape that they probably found in a back plot of their vineyard, right? Like, oh, let's try to plant it here. Let's not even let the wine board, I forgot the name of the wine board association that has to approve that this is okay. This is a Sauvignon Blanc grape. And they were blending it with, I always forget how to pronounce this, but it's Semillon, right?
Semillon, yeah.
So it's usually a blend of the two, and this vintage 2004 happens to be like pure Sauvignon Blanc, so it's going to be extremely dry. So it's a really unique approach to this, and that makes me think of like Tom Elmhurst mixing Brockhampton. Like you expect Tom Elmhurst to do Adele, to do Amy Winehouse, to do these records, and then he gets a hold of Brockhampton, and Brockhampton's record and the production tells him what to do, right? So he's I don't know necessarily what his approach is on that kind of record, because if I were to dissect it, I think it could have more bottom end. I think it could have more certain things, but that's not Tom's sound, right? But it still works because the story is involved and already told to him in the production. And I found it really interesting that they went with him for that record. And then I've seen, and as a competitive person who would have loved to have that gig, right? This is also going full circle back into that topic of the night, where I'm like, oh, I kind of like that they chose him though. I kind of like that they were like, let's see what happens if you take the red winemaker and make white wine and just see. And like, it might not work, but we have the budget, so let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
And I just like that the story is being told by what's inherent in it. And our job is to tease it out and maximize it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the job of many disciplines, right? And many craftspeople that are find the best iron, find the best steel, and make the knife. Like the knife maker is only as good as the steel. Like this is
a carpenter is looking at the wood and or a sculptor trying to pull out what's in there. You know what I mean? So,
and I'm really excited about drinking this wine tomorrow night.
It's pretty exciting.
It's pretty exciting. Gonna bring in some Bronzino from Metza.
Not too shabby.
Some herbs.
And good company.
Some
Sammy
great
Whitty's a
company. I
good
haven't
dude.
seen Sammy in so long. And
Yeah.
I just, someone sends you a bottle of wine and says, I have to drink this with you. It's just one of the best texts to get, not going to lie.
Yeah.
Just, at least people that know me, there's not really much more you can.
Send us pictures of bottles of wine.
And invitations to come over and drink it.
Good bottles of wine. Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, me too.
We touched on our topic. I'd love to say that I think maybe next time or a time we should talk about conflict a little more. I think we should go a separate topic, go a little deeper into the pros and cons of it.
The aversion to it.
I guess in closing, if there's conflict, it may not always be a sign that things are going wrong.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's useful and fuels better.
Especially when you're trying to do your best, you're trying to push the limits.
Yes.
And you're trying to reach very high levels, you will have conflict.
Yeah, you're going to hit the edges.
Yeah. Let's come back to that. That was nice.
Sure.
Had fun with you guys tonight.
Thank you. You too, man.
Conversations is produced and mixed by Dylan Seals. The Conversations theme was performed and recorded by the Hazelrick Brothers.